Hello and welcome to the Pitt Mailbag Show here from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. We're your hosts, Chris Carter and Stephen Thompson, your Pitt beat writers here at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. As always, find all of our written work at post-gazette.com and find all of our podcasting content at the Post-Gazette by searching the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette or Post-Gazette Sports on your favorite podcasting app or on YouTube. You can catch all of the daily content that we have as well as the Monday, Wednesday, Friday episodes of the North Shore Drive podcast. And as always, this show is brought to you by Mike's Beer Bar, the best bar in Pittsburgh. When you go to Mike's Beer Bar, they have over 500 different available beers. 300 of those beers from local Pittsburgh, and 80 of those local beers are available on tap. It's the best bar in Pittsburgh. Plenty of things to enjoy there. We're joined by my man, Steven, who is on the road. Is this your first road assignment for the PG? You're out in Charlotte right now.
Yes, it sure is my first road assignment for the PG. I grew up in DC, which is literally built on a swamp, so I'm used to hot, humid summers. But I think this is literally the most humid place I've ever been in my life. I was walking around for like 2 minutes trying to find the entrance to my hotel, and I ended up just dripping in sweat afterwards. So it's a nice city, but I was happy to be honestly inside, listening to people talk in an air-conditioned ballroom all day. That was actually not too bad.
Oh, that does sound nice. We'll get to some of the ACC talk soon because Stephen wrote an article after getting to talk with Jim Phillips, the ACC commissioner, and seeing how things are going there. There's a lot of questions about the ACC. We'll get into that soon, but first, wanted to open up with what's kind of the big question of the past week. And this comes from Kent, who emailed us asking, do you think Pitt jumped the gun on Jeff Capel's extension, considering he's only made one NCAA tournament in 6 seasons? Now, for a reminder for everyone, Jeff Capel, Pitt basketball head coach, received a 3-year extension on his contract last week. Of course, he did this when I was on vacation. Couldn't do this when I was working. Just had to wait until I was gone. But that's all right. Stephen was here to cover it. Stephen, since you wrote about this, I want to let you lead on this. What were your thoughts on the timing of this extension? Because there were some fans who were complaining out on social media that this was a rushed decision, but there were others who appreciated it.
Yeah, I think there's kind of 2 ways of looking at any kind of contract extension for a college head coach, or for really any coach in general. I mean, I guess anyone in sports, quite honestly. It's either a reward for past performance or an indicator that you have faith in the direction of whatever this person's doing. And I think this extension falls more on the side of, Pitt believes in what Jeff Capel is building, and they have a lot of faith in the future. It is a kind of preemptive payment for future success. And I think you look at what Jeff Capel has done over the past 2 years. After that first season where he makes his one NCAA tournament, I think the question afterwards was, okay, he made his NCAA tournament. He kind of ended this long drought for Pitt. Seems to have kind of pulled them out of a really deep hole, but can he build something sustainable? And I know they didn't make the NCAA tournament last year, but still won 22 games. They made Pitt's deepest run in the ACC in the ACC tournament in program history. They sent Bob Carrington to the first round of the NBA draft, the lottery of the NBA draft. Won 46 games over the past 2 years. I think there's a lot of evidence that what Jeff Capel is building is sustainable. I think the recruiting has taken a step up. I think they're the kind of chemistry issues, as they were put, that plagued him during the first 4 years are not there anymore, and not even really a concern at all. And so I think that's all kind of a good reason to give Jeff Capel this extension. I think I'm projecting out a little bit and just making a prediction that Jeff Capel's next few years are going to be pretty good. Like I said, I think he's recruited pretty well. I think he's going to keep recruiting pretty well. He's only going to keep recruiting from a place of strength. He's had a ton of success in the transfer portal as well. He's proven to be a coach that can develop players. Guys generally get better than what they were when they arrived at Pitt when Jeff Capel was coaching them. And I think you also got to consider the deep hole that this program was in when Jeff Capel inherited it. This was not an easy rebuild. This was not something that could be done super easily. I remember talking to Jeff way before I worked in this job. I think I was still in school, but it was after the ACC tournament. It was after his 4th season at the helm. He had just gotten bounced by a pretty bad Boston College team in the first round of the ACC tournament. And I asked him, basically, is this program better off than it was when he inherited it? And he laughed. He laughed at first before saying, yeah. And I think that was his way of kind of saying, he went on to explain a little bit deeper that people didn't really realize how low this program was. There was kind of, I think he alluded to, kind of a lack of institutional support for the program as well. The facilities were lagging behind. It just generally wasn't a program that was ready to compete in the ACC. And so as that stuff has kind of come along, as Jeff has kind of gotten his feet under him, he's been able to kind of translate that to success on the court. And I get it, one NCAA tournament appearance in 6 seasons doesn't look great, but I don't think that's going to be the reality for much longer. I don't think that's going to be I don't think that's going to turn into one NCAA tournament in 7, 8, 9 seasons. And so I think this is projecting outwards a little bit. This is a show of faith from Heather Lyke. And, if I had to guess, if I was a betting man, I think it's going to be money well spent.
I actually remember that time that he did laugh at that question because I think part of it is Jeff Capel, and he's talked about it. When he came in, he had to reset the culture, like not just like the intangible culture, but literally like the facilities and like how they watched film, the practices that went on. And he had to do so with no lingering players who could set a tone for him. When he brought in his first guys, Xavier Johnson, Trey McGowan, Audi's Tony, there was nobody to set a bar for them. There was no veterans to say, hey, young buck, this is how we do it around here. He had to reset that as well. Again, like even in 2021, 2022, that the end of his 4th season, it was a pretty rough year for Pitt all around. That still was miles better from where they were when they were 0-18 in the ACC the year before Jeff Capel took over. And I think that's where, he kind of laughs at it. But I think if we're being honest, again, like Pitt is still on the rise. Like this was still going to be, we weren't sure how this past year would go. There were many people who were wondering, would they go back to being an 11, 10 win, type of team, or would they stay in the 20 win category? They stayed in the 20 win category. It just wasn't enough in the eyes of the bracket makers to get them into the tournament, even though they played very well this season and were, arguably better than several teams that did get in. And so I think if you look at what they've done, I mean, Jeff Capel inherited the program coming off an 8-win season. They started off with 14 wins, 16 wins. They dipped down to 10, 11 wins for 2 years. But you kind of have to acknowledge that like those first, I even say the first 3 seasons kind of are all part of the rebuilding, going through, fixing a lot of things. And the 4th season was rough, but that's why it was big that he had that 5th season where they made the tournament and they showed the run. And now they've had back-to-back 20-win seasons. That hadn't happened since the end of the 2013 and the end of the 2014 seasons. That's kind of what you want to start getting back to. And now there's a bit more of expectation for them. The culture's established there. And it's not just, Blake Hinson kind of carrying over what they did from as the lone veteran from the last team that was really a playmaker. Now there's Jalen Lowe. Now there's Ishmael Leggett. Now the twins are the bigger part of this. They have pieces, and they're getting guys in the portal, and they're getting guys. They're getting consistent. This is back-to-back years where they've gotten 4-star talents who look like they're going to be able to contribute. So there's plenty of growth happening for this program, and I think that's the thing that people need to look at is that the trajectory is pointing very much up for Pitt. Now, over the next 3 years, they need to make the tournament. This is not us saying that if they don't make the tournament, they should just keep going for the vibes or whatever. But it's a realistic acknowledgement by the program to say, hey, Jeff Capel's doing a pretty doggone good job. He's won 60, basically 2/3 of his games the last two years, which is a big step up. They haven't had a winning percentage like that since those 2013 and 2014 teams. So I'm right with you, Stephen. I think it was the right call. I get that there's some Pitt fans who are frustrated and they want to get back to the glory days of when they were regularly in the top of the Big East. There was a 7-year run where they were at some point ranked in the top 10. And I get that. You want to get back to that was the time when I was a kid. It was a lot of fun to be able to see those type of things. But there's the acknowledgement it takes a long time to dig yourself out of a hole, and Jeff Capel has been digging for quite a while and has gotten real results for Pitt.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, this is just kind of Heather Lyke's MO too, is to kind of have some patience. She did it with Pat Narduzzi.
Yep.
And paid off with an ACC championship in 2021. I think people forget that was his 6th year, or maybe that was his 6th year. Yeah, because he started in 2015. So, builds like this take time. Pitt is not the kind of school where you can hire the coach that can do that right away, can turn around a culture like that right away, turn around a program like that right away. So I would say patience. And I don't think Heather Lyke has steered this athletic department wrong many times before, especially in their two biggest sports. So I'd have a little faith in her too.
I hear you on that. Let's dive into our next question that comes from Mickey here. He says, are Bub and Blake doing well enough to guarantee them playing time in the NBA this season? Now, of course, this is referring to Bub Carrington and Blake Hinson, the two latest Pitt guys to head to the NBA. Both have been playing in the summer league. We've talked about this before because both of them have had good performances before. But Steven, at least in what I've been able to see from the summer league, both have made some really impressive performances. Bub Carrington almost had a triple-double last week. Blake went off again on a scoring phenom. He got to start for the Lakers this past weekend and really showed up. I mean, I am no expert as far as how good you have to be in summer league to get to time off the bench in the NBA the very next season if you're your first year in the league. But at least from what I'm seeing, these guys are delivering on the court in these summer league games.
Yeah, I'd say that's especially true for Bub Carrington. He has been one of the more impressive rookies, period, at Summer League. He kind of is the Wizards' future right now. I mean, they drafted Alex Sarr, I believe second overall this year, but Bub has been their best rookie so far. He's been their most impressive member of that three-man draft class. They drafted three guys in the first round, and he's been by far the best of the three so far. He's kind of their future right now. So, Bub could end up struggling by the time he gets to the NBA, plays against some NBA competition, and that might just happen. He might go through some growing pains, but the Wizards aren't going to be able to. The Wizards are in a position where they can afford to let him work through some rookie mistakes, let him grow a little bit, kind of let him make mistakes without a ton of pressure on him. So he is at the very least going to play. I don't think he will start. I think he's going to come off the bench for the most part. But he is certainly going to play because it is in the Wizards' best interest for him to get a ton of minutes at the NBA level and for him to kind of work out whatever growing pains he has to go through at the NBA level. The thing about Blake, which I think I think Blake's just a little different because he is so much older, because his team is in a different situation. They are in win now mode. You have two future Hall of Famers in LeBron James and Anthony Davis on your team. You can't afford you can't afford to let a rookie, especially I'm not sure exactly how old Blake is, but I believe he's north of 23 at least. He might be 24. You can't really afford to let him work through as many mistakes. Blake's got to be good really consistently to get minutes off the bench. And in Summer League, he's had two good games and two pretty poor games. So Blake's going to have to figure out the consistency a little bit. If he can do that, he'll get minutes off the bench. But it's a much harder kind of uphill battle for Blake to do that than it will be for Bub.
No, I hear you. It is a different type of story. Again, that's why Blake kind of went undrafted. But Blake's a guy who he's beaten the odds before, so I think that there's a reason to have confidence there. If you're wondering what their numbers are, basketball.realgm.com charts Blake Hinson for averaging 11.4 points per game. That's second most on the Lakers summer league roster right now, only behind Dalton Knecht. He's making about 2.6 3-pointers per game out of 7.8 attempts for about hitting 33% there. You want that number to be higher, but again, I think that's just part of it is, hey, he's growing, he's learning. I think his size and his shooting ability, if they see how he continues to hit, I think he'll find a way to get on a bench. And I think if he can continue to just build consistency, that'll be the big part of his game. But for Bub, again, you said it, he is kind of the star right now. Of the rookies right now, he averages 15.8 points a game in summer league games. That's the most on the Wizards right now. His 5.2 assists also most on the Wizards right now, and he's also playing the most minutes on the Wizards, averaging 32.6 points per game. That's pretty impressive when you look at how things have kind of worked out and what's been going on so far. I think there's a lot to be said from guys, and in fact, going out and looking at how these things stack up. I think that Bub Carrington, a lot of people are wondering, would he get bullied in these situations? Would he, would he be in a situation where, he's just not performing as well, or the big guy's kind of bullying, and he's not, and at least in the summer league games. And again, it's just like preseason in the NFL. You got to see what it's like when he goes up against the guys that are actually starting in the NBA and the talent that's good. But for doing this, he is checking a lot of boxes, and I think that's a very, very good sign for what he's been able to do to be able to put up these kind of numbers so far.
Yeah, absolutely. And, like that's the thing. Bub, like I said, he might end up getting bullied when he gets to the NBA. Like he's 18 years, he actually just turned
He's
19 years old.
exactly.
That you should expect that to happen. But, the only way you're going to get through those situations is to play hard through them, to experience them, to know how to, that's the only way you learn how to get around them. So I think the Wizards are going to really throw Bub into the fire. How successful he is, I don't know, but he is absolutely going to be on the floor. There's going to be plenty of reasons for Pitt fans to watch the Wizards this year.
Absolutely. Our last question is going to be more directed towards you, Stephen, because you're the one on the road here. And this one comes from Ollie, because who asks, can the ACC keep up with other major conferences, or is it going to be the next Pac-12 sooner or later? Stephen, you got a chance to write about this. Jim Phillips, the ACC commissioner. It's kind of the thing that everyone has to acknowledge at this point, right? The SEC and the Big Ten are the two big conferences. The Big 12's kind of behind them. But you look at the ACC, and something that we've talked about here at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette a few times. The ACC became the first ever conference to have an undefeated conference champion in the Power Five to not make the college football playoff, and of course that being Florida State. And as we've reported and analyzed here at the Post-Gazette before, the ACC in the last 5 March Madness tournaments is the only of the major 6 conferences in college basketball to have teams with 22 and 23 wins to not make the tournament. And so, the question is, are there factors playing against them in this, and can they keep up with this, or is this kind of an inevitable thing where the ACC is just going to slide out of existence until they are the Pac-12 and the other conferences gobble up the teams that are in the conference?
Yeah, I think the most concerning thing, if you're the ACC, is you listen to Jim Phillips talk today, and the ACC set all kinds of records in revenue, in distributed revenue to each of their schools over the last fiscal year. They increased distributable revenue by 14%. They surpassed $700 million in distributable revenue for the first time in league history. Their $45 million, the average payout to each of the 14 schools last year was a league record. And they're expecting these numbers to go up, but even with more than $700 million in revenue, the Big Ten is closing in on $900 million in revenue. The SEC is up north, is close to $860 million. So, that gap in revenue was closer to $200 million when during the previous fiscal year, excuse me. So they've closed the gap incrementally, and I think they're really hopeful that expanding with SMU and Cal and Stanford will add some more revenue streams, increase their market share. They have new incentives, like success-based incentives. So if you make a bowl game, if you appear in the college football playoff, you get into the NCAA men's tournament, you win in the NCAA tournament, you can get some extra money off of that if you're an individual school. But the thing is, it's not just about growing. It's not just about kind of stuffing your own pockets. It's about closing the gap on the SEC and the Big Ten, because college sports, I mean, going back to even in the days when it was just a facilities arms race. It was never about just having enough, or never just about having enough money or a nice enough locker room or something like that. You always were just locked in this constant race for more, and just the continual pursuit of the best, or the most, is kind of what drives this, and what could threaten to drive the ACC into the ground. I think the only way they could possibly hope to make that gap a little bit smaller and less significant is if you add like a Notre Dame. If you're able to retain Clemson and Florida State, keep them from getting out, and you bring in a Notre Dame somehow, and they you're somehow convince them to abandon independence in football and make them a full member. But there's really no indication that Notre Dame is interested in doing that, and no indication that they have to do that. So I think really the only thing that the ACC can really do right now is just hope that grain of rights agreement really is as ironclad as they believe that it is, and just hope that Clemson and Florida State don't kind of knock off and find an invitation to one of these other leagues, the Big Ten or the SEC. I think the good news is they won't be the last conference to kind of fall to the wayside. I think the Big 12, while they're being really aggressive, they are going to have to share a lot of money with a lot of different schools. I think there's a scenario where the ACC could actually end up absorbing some of those Big 12 schools if the Big 12 eventually does collapse. But I think all the ACC can do right now is kind of tread water for the next, I don't know, they got to figure out this lawsuit with Florida State and Clemson. And then you kind of go from there. I mean, that's the next step that's going to determine every next move for really everyone in college sports. The other thing is, I mean, look, all these kind of permutations that we've seen happen over the last, 4 years or whatever, really since the pandemic, kind of came out of nowhere. So we don't really know what's going to happen next year. I remember hearing someone say today, it's kind of been the last 3 ACC media days where the next round of realignment has kind of been released. Like, Texas and Oklahoma happened 3 years ago around this time. Then it was USC and UCLA. Then it was, Washington, Oregon, and the rest of the Pac-12 kind of falling apart. So this stuff, it doesn't look like it's going to happen until it all just happens at once. So it's almost impossible to predict what's going to happen next. But if you're the ACC, you are completely locked in on keeping Clemson and Florida State in your conference, tied to that grant of rights agreement for as long as humanly possible, because that's the only way you're going to buy yourself enough time to even think about getting on the same level as the Big Ten and the SEC.
No, I hear you on that, and I've said this several times. I think that there's, you and I, we get to be privy to seeing the fans go have their back and forth of the different conferences. There are a lot of people who are fans of the Big 12 or talk about the Big 12 who are kind of salivating at the idea of the ACC falling apart. And I don't know. I've had this opinion for quite some time where I've thought, man, I feel like the ACC and the Big 12 should be looking at each other like we both need to be sticking around right now, because if one of them goes, the other is next. And I think like the other becomes a lot more of a target for the SEC and the Big Ten to pick at, because those are the top two. There's no questions asked. Like they're, it's kind of leaning to someday those two might be like the NFL, the NFC, and the AFC, but for just these two conferences and how they work. And who knows how college realignment will continue to happen. It's just an ever-changing world that's become very hard to predict. But I think that if the ACC does fold in the next 10, 20 years or whatever it is, the Big 12 is going to also be having some big questions about itself, because there's programs within its ranks that have already been picked off by other major conferences. So I think that there should be a sense of unity, I think, between some of these conferences. But I also think the ACC, it's been put in a pickle with its TV contract, with the situations that it has with the revenue. And sure, they're pulling in money, but they need to keep doing it. And I think that if they keep having teams produce at a high level, if they keep having college basketball success, and they get some more college football success, maybe that can help them keep pace, or at least buy themselves time to get better situations. Because right now they are kind of, if you're looking at what used to be the Power Five, they are kind of the fourth conference right now as far as how things have been set up.
Yeah, you definitely need some of these, you need SMU, I think, to be really good. You need Cal to kind of figure itself out. Stanford has the potential to, we've seen them under David Shaw kind of rise to become a national player, but you also need like Miami to step up and be what they've been. You need Louisville to be able, like, you need challengers in the ACC, and in a 12-team playoff era, there's a lot more openings for teams to sneak into that national conversation, to be kind of considered members of the elite. But you need some of these teams that have struggled a little bit as they transition to the ACC to step up. And I mean, Pitt's included in that conversation too. Like Pitt can't be going 3-9 again. You need kind of everyone to kind of raise the profile of the ACC together, because there's no getting around it that the ACC has been kind of viewed, and for some pretty logical reasons, as a conference in decline. So there's some new coaches in the league. There's some programs that I think are kind of on the rise. I look at Georgia Tech. I look at Syracuse, and Miami and Virginia Tech in that same kind of conversation, as well as teams that have a chance to take a step forward and kind of be on the rise. You need a little bit more parity. You need a little bit more depth. You can't have, just the bottom of the league being so bad. It's kind of the same conversation as basketball over the past few years. You need the depth in addition to kind of the top tier talent as well. And I think that's what the ACC can at least do on the field to help themselves out in the short term.
Absolutely. We'll keep you covered on all things Pitt and ACC talk here at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Steven, thanks for all the great work that you're doing. Stay cool out there in Charlotte. Don't sweat too much out there, man. It is hot everywhere, but you go down south, it's going to be even worse. So enjoy your time there, sir. Pitt's gonna have its media day coming up. Steven's gonna be on hand for that there, and then Pitt training camp just a week away. They're coming back. Next week. It's gonna be very exciting. We'll have you covered here. All things Pitt on the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, as well as our daily positional previews that keep coming out all throughout the weeks. If you want breakdowns on every position group at Pitt, look no further than the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Thanks again, Steven, and thanks again to you all for tuning in and all of our people who asked questions. We'll be back next week with another episode of the Pitt Mailbag Show right here from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.